and welcome to this meeting of the Nelson City Council's Governance Committee. As usual, it is being broadcast live to the world, and most of you, I think, know the procedure for the PA system. The red light is on, that means it's working for you. Moving into the agenda, we have a welcome to Hayden and to Latai. Welcome along to view and participate in this meeting of the Council's Governance Committee. Hope it's a good experience for you and will serve you well as you work for the city in your capacity as a youth councillor. So well done. We move to apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Matheson and no other apologies because her worship is here. And someone moved the apologies be sustained, moved by Councillor Noonan, seconded by Councillor Rutledge. All those in favour will say aye. Against, no. Carried. There's no change to the order of business in the open agenda. There will be a slight change to the business in the confidential agenda, which we'll outline when we get there. You all know that it's a responsibility to declare your interests if you have any matters that you're involved in and consequently have an interest on the agenda, particularly if they are pecuniary interests. In other words, if you're being paid for them, you should be aware of the fact that the committee should know this, and you should leave the meeting if it is deemed the correct thing to do in that situation. So has anyone any conflicts of interest they wish to declare at this stage? Nope. We have item public forum. Is anyone wishing to speak in public forum? Who is our visitor in the audience? No? Welcome to you. There is no public forum. We move to confirmation of minutes on page 8 to 12. I'll call for someone who was at that meeting, Councillor Dahlberg, to move that the minutes be approved as a true and correct record. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Courtney. Are there any matters of correction to be brought to the attention of the committee? There are none. No comments. I'll put the motion that the minutes be approved as a true and correct record. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. The ayes have it. Item 6 of the agenda, which is pages 13 to 14, is the status report. There's the one item on the status report. I'll ask Mr. Ball to comment to the Council Committee on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just regarding the Cycle Lift Society, or the gondola, as it's commonly known, I met last week with representatives of the project. It's tracking well. My predecessor, Chris Ward, received some information just before he left, which we're staffing out at the moment, and we'll have a report ready for the next meeting of governance on the 7th of June.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. I can add to that the Mayor and I have met with the group that are organising this. I can say that it's very positive, which is great news for Nelson, and looking forward very much to having more detail on the agenda for our next meeting and some progress in this area, because it will be a wonderful thing for Nelson if we can bring it off. So I'll call for someone to move that the status report be received. Councillor Courtney moved. Seconded Councillor Rutledge. Are there any questions? Any comments? There are none. I'll put it. All those in favour will say aye. Against? There are none. Carried. Item 7 is Chairperson's report. The only thing that I was going to report was what we've just done with the gondola. That's the exciting thing for me. So no other matters that I need to bring to the attention of the committee as chairperson. Which brings us then to item number 8, and I have much pleasure in calling to the table ex-Councillor Gail Collingwood, who is our very hard-working Sister Cities Coordinator, and her report is included on pages 15 and 17. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barker. Good morning, everybody. This is the first of the 2 reports that I'm required as the Sister Cities Coordinator to give to Council each year. Last year that fell apart and you only got 1, but I'm sure that the Sister Cities kept going anyway, so I'm sure you all coped. So I know that you will have read this, so I'll just praise some of the information that's in here and add one other piece of information to it. The 3 Sister City organisations in the main continue to be active, with the exception of Eureka, that isn't particularly active but still does respond, as you will read, to requests from Eureka, and gave Eureka some publicity when the Modellers' big conference and exhibition was on here during the summer by having a quilt with the railways from the western coast of America presented in a quilt, which was won and now hangs in a business office in Christchurch. So while these are only minor things, but still Eureka gets some publicity as being our sister city because there is an explanation with it. Meazu are continuing to be very active, and you'll read there that they have some students coming to Nelson shortly, and about 10 students and 2 chaperones will be here for 5 nights late in July. And then they're picking up on their choir tour to Japan and going to welcome next year a choir from Kyoto. Young Jung, which really sits with the Nelson Regional Development Agency for responsibility, the China Friendship Society have picked up some connections with Young Jung, and there's a group of students very shortly going to take off, and I think it's this week, to Young Jung, which is a very, very different and pretty city in China. It's well worth a visit. And certainly the beach area right beside Young Jung is very popular, and they'll have a fantastic time there because it has a sunken ship on display in a museum that's still full of china, like physical ceramics from whenever. The Mayor might remember the dates better than I do. And thank you to the Mayor for supporting that visit with messages in Nelson and externally with Young Jung. The students are going to report back on May the 18th. I still attend as many functions as possible from both of those, the 2 active Sister City groups, and I will attend the annual conference at the beginning, it's a bit later in May this time, to be held in Lower Hutt in their brand new building. Fingers crossed that it's actually completed and finished and available. I'm sure Ray Wallace has got his fingers crossed as well. Ray is very much into Sister Cities and really loves the school's involvement, so it'll be fantastic to go to that, and I thank you very much for that opportunity. The Sister Cities comply with their requests or their outlines for the funding that they identify to be needed for the coming year, in the next annual year, and also they report well back to now to Mary Birch. The interesting point is the last one, 2.5, where within a few days I actually had 2 requests for contacts with Meazu, and one was from Caroline Matthews, whose father was a councillor in 1987 when Meazu was first established, and she presented a bouquet of flowers to the Mayoress on her very first visit to Nelson. And she is hoping to take her family to Meazu. It was being cancelled for this year, but I think that that's an interesting connection, that here 30 years down the track these relationships still stand. And at our last meeting, we talked about how the Sister City Coordinating Group and the Sister City organisations can liaise with the Youth Council, and at their next meeting there will be a suggestion that they fill a place that the International Relationships Policy says the community can have a representative on the Sister Cities Coordinating Group, and so that invitation will go to the Youth Council at their next meeting. There's only 4 meetings a year, so it isn't arduous, but it's what the Youth Council might group with the sister cities, which I think will be important. So that is my report. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I think the sound system is an improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Yes, again, thank you for your report. And thank you to Councillor Dalberg, who is our representative for this area of activity. I have a couple of questions. The group coming from Kyoto, I know Miyazu's in the Kyoto Prefecture, so will there be any Miyazu people in that Kyoto choir, to your knowledge?
I don't know the composition of it at the moment, but the Nelson group did sing in Kyoto as well, and so that spurred their interest in coming. They were going to try and split their few days over Wellington and Nelson, but they're being encouraged to spend I think they've got 5 days that they're looking at actually in Nelson. So, yeah, yes, and that's the reason why they have an interest. Yeah.
Yes. And my other question is about item 2.15 and Caroline Matthews. Just for the record, it was actually her mother who was Councillor Dorothy Matthews. Her father was, to my knowledge, was Bill Matthews, the Superintendent of Parks and Rec before that, but Dorothy Matthews was the City Councillor.
It was Dorothy that I was talking to, and she said it was her husband, so maybe things have got a little hazy in time for somebody anyway. So that was the story that I had, that it was her father who was a key person at that time. I'm sure we can go back and look at the archived records to check that out. But anyway, hopefully they will go for a visit, and I think they have a photo of that as well.
I'd like to see it happen for them, because I also have met and stayed in his traditional Japanese inn, the Mr. Tokuda that's mentioned there, and I can tell you it was an amazing experience to spend 3 nights in a traditional Japanese inn. And yeah, unfortunately he's now passed on.
The son apparently owns a hotel, and so welcomes anybody who would like to stay, and is very excited to have Nelsonians to stay.
Good. Are there any other questions around the table? Been moved by Councillor Dalberg, the Council's representative for Sister City Matters. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Noonan has seconded it. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against no, carried. Gail, thank you very much again. The City appreciates your efforts. All right, we're now on item number 9, pages 18 to 25. That's the NELMAC half-yearly interim report. Is Nikki here? Nikki, would you like to join the table, please? Thank you. Any corrections or alterations to your report?
Through the Chair, no.
Thank you. Points you'd like to highlight?
Through the Chair, the overall, the NELMAC 6 monthly results were slightly up on the same time last year, however, I believe that it'll be a reasonable stretch for them to reach their profit target for the end of the year. It is very seasonal, and However, it may be useful to talk to the NALMAC board when they do their strategic presentation later on in the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Alberg.
Thank you, Mr Chair. A question relating to 4.3, page 18, with more the wording, with more work being tendered and the cost of winning and delivering work increasing, relating to the Nelson City Council work. Is that compared to the non-Nelson City Council? Are they tendering for other work?
Through the Chair, it's a mixture of NCC and non-NCC work that they're having to tender more for, and I think they've highlighted previously that a large proportion of their work is tendered annually, and therefore there is quite a lot of overhead in that process.
Second question, so is that kind of a good concept that if they're getting them, winning them, and we are doing annual tendering processes, does that need to be reconsidered, or are we just accept the fact that they're getting more cost?
So through the Chair, I wasn't necessarily referring to the fact that NCC tenders annually. I'm just referring to the fact that a lot of the work that they are undertaking, they'll have to tender for. Nelson City Council, for a lot of its core maintenance contracts, they're not tendered annually, they're on a longer term contractual basis.
Any further questions? Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you. This subject of tendering has come up and been raised by NALMAC a number of times. Has this been a change in policy by Nelson City Council, or is it a change in the way of existing policies being applied?
Through the Chair, I think this is probably better to be discussed in public excluded, if you want to have a discussion on tendering.
I would remind Councillor Rutledge that there is an item on public excluded. These points are covered in that report, so I suggest we hold it to there. Councillor Courtney.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chair. I might also be in that category that you placed Councillor Rutledge in, but I'm just going to say, are things progressing, through you, Mr Chair, to Officer Harrison, are things progressing in respect of greater alliancing? I think we were talking about some months ago with NALMAC, that was their desire, wasn't it? With officers. There was going to be work done between officers and NALMAC towards greater alliancing with them. How is that progressing well?
So through the Chair, I think it's better that discussions happen through the statement of intent, which is in public excluded.
Yeah, the Chief Exec.
One of the issues is that the workload on our staff is fierce at the moment in terms of the long-term plan and the regional land transport plan. So it's more realistically a piece of work that we'll be looking at at the start of the new financial year, rather than in this 2 or 3 month period.
Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you. Just the response to this discussion is for public excluded. 4.3 on page 18 clearly calls out this cost of tendering, and so this is a matter in the public agenda. So I'm just not sure if we have questions regarding that, why that shouldn't be in public.
I believe personally that the clauses quoted in the confidential motion to go into committee cover the commercial aspects, which are quite important in this area and have a direct bearing on the profitability and the relationship between the council and its company. And I think it's best that it be handled in committee, and if there are matters that can be brought into the public later, they will be. We do not want to be in a position where we're handicapping or jeopardising our company. So are there any further questions? I'll ask for someone to move that the report, the half-yearly report and its attachment be received. Moved by Councillor Courtney. Have a seconder? Councillor Skinner. It's open for discussion. Are there any one wishing to speak to the motion, speak against it? Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, just thanking for the report brought to us by staff. There will be, the report does open up some questions to go into the later part of the agenda. So I think there'll be some keen questions there, especially in regards to some of the sports fields, spring work being affected by wet weather and some employment issues.
Thank you. No further debate. I'll put the question. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Thank you. Item 10, Bishop Suter Trust Half-Yearly Report. And we welcome to the meeting today Ms Catchpole, Mr Potton, Mr Hambleton and Jane Defoe. So you can all join the table. And Nikki, again, that's Roger. If you can join the table as well, Roger. So if you can just allow us the opportunity for our report writer to present his report, which you will have seen on our open agenda. That's Mr Ball, Roger Ball, and then we'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I can be brief and just to thank my predecessor, Chris Ward, for preparing the materials in front of us. I think it's reasonably straightforward. We have a statement of intent from the Bishop Suter Trust, which meets our expectations. I'll just draw your attention to 4.8, just as a reminder, as we're going into LTP work, that additional funding for the Trust has been included in the Council's draft long-term plan to provide for additional staffing and ongoing maintenance. The draft SOI has assumed that this funding will be confirmed, and if it is not, then obviously we'll just need to come back to the SOI, but that's all I have for you at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. So Craig, you've seen a copy of our report?
Yes, I've just seen what's before me here. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yep.
So that's what we have received, to which of course was attached all your papers, so now it's an opportunity for you to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and councillors for the opportunity to come and speak to it, and I'd ask Julie Catchpole to just run through it with a few visuals on the wall here to help us through it. Thank you.
Something on the screen.
If we can get that out of the way.
Technology people, marvellous. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on both our statement of intent and our review. So our statement of intent is in effect a 5-year plan, and we've got the ultimate goal of raising the reputation and profile of the Suter to being nationally significant, not just a regional art gallery, and our statement of intent includes quite a few stretch targets, including increasing our non-base funding and growing visitors. We've had a stellar summer. This graph shows you our overall visitors. The browny red colour is the venue hire, the blue our general visitors. The green on this chart is this financial year, and you can see that it's steadily growing. The blue was when we were off-site, just as a comparison. One of the contributors to this was our suite of exhibitions over summer. We had over 43,000 people come over 18-week period. This is the makeup of our visitors, so exhibition visitors is the blue on the graph, but otherwise there's venue, hire, education and so forth. Now, we do regularly changing exhibitions, so these are some of the types of exhibitions that we do and will be doing in the future. Some of those are seriously very contemporary. This is the painting, Simon Ingram and the painting machine. It's a painting by remote control. Local and thematic, this is a ceramics exhibition of which of course this region is renowned. These are 2 exhibitions by local artists, and that's one of our agendas, is to promote our local artists and develop their profile nationally. We've just entered these 2 exhibitions in the museum's Aotearoa Awards, so fingers crossed. Education is something that has been a strand of our activity, and a very important strand of our activity. We have a Ministry of Education contract to deliver learning experiences outside the classroom. That concludes at the end of this financial year. It's a contestable fund, so that's a risk that's out there. At the moment, that funds a 0.5 educator. You can see our target there is 3,100 students. We estimate by the end of next term that we will be just short of 6,000 students through formal programs. Here's a formal program. This is a collaborative project that's just happened, this Albion Square. We've also do after school education, and we have for a long time had kids club for 5 to 10-year-olds. We've just initiated this teenage after school program, and this year we've embarked on adult art classes. I'm very envious, I'd like to be in there. And we do public programs, regular series of Thursday talks, openings, events, book launches. This is learning about art, and we're into the collection. I'm in our storeroom. This is an artwork that's now outside the front of the gallery. It's by Andrew Drummond, ex-Nelson Tasman guy with a national reputation. This sculpture was purchased with a very excuse me, generous donation of $25,000. And this is part of our agenda to purchase works that have a regional relevance but are by nationally significant artists. This one here we're just in the throes of acquiring. It's by Warwick Freeman, who was a Nelson boy, now has an international reputation. We also want to be part of Nelson Inc. and supporting our regional identity. These are 2 activities. Netball, as you can tell by the height of them, look like a dwarf. And the top images is the Nelson Orchestra, which was part of a video production promoting the region. We do have some issues ahead of us though. We've got increased overheads in our fabulous new facility. One of those is insurance. Kaikoura is one factor, but of course now we've got facilities that are far more valuable. Energy cost, cleaning and staff capacity. So our current staffing is 7.9 FTEs or 3 full-timers. We are open every day of the year but 3 days. And so we do need some additional resource to make our work program achievable. We are supported by a fabulous team of volunteers, and it's probably the point where I also acknowledge the incredibly hard-working trust board that we have, when we couldn't do without our volunteers. You can see here Peter Millwood, retired museum director, it's one of those. Now in your papers you've got our financial statements. This is a restated version and version that we presented to Tasman District Council. We were predicted to be in deficit at 30 December. We're actually on the right side of the ledger.
One of our concerns is that we'll raise more revenue, but we also do not want to be in a situation where we can't fund maintenance and ongoing renewals, because we do not want the Suter to get into the kind of parlous state it was before redevelopment. These are our sources of revenue that we can work with: leases, venue hire, retail, the Art Society, exhibitions, classes and events, Friends of the Suter, our legacy group, which is what provides funding for collection acquisitions, and we do other kinds of fundraising activities, sponsorship, seek grants and so on. Here are part of our leases retail. We're trying to increase venue hire. We've got a number of venues, if you like. We've got the theatre, the foyer, the education room, and the boardroom, and then activities in our galleries. So we believe there's room for growth there. Our shop is doing particularly well, and it profiles artworks from the region. In our cafe, of course, a fabulous location. We have pretty modest budget for marketing, so we're tending towards doing more social media promotion. We do have support groups too, the Friends of the Suter, and there I also mentioned the Legacy Group, which is high-level donors. In the future, what do we want to do? We want to fundraise to acquire an absolutely knockout standout artwork. We want to increase sponsorship and partnership support for Suter projects. Of course, we want to increase visitors. All this is to build the reputation of the Suter and attract people to come to Nelson and support our local community. Place to visit. And that's us.
Thank you, Julie. Craig, do you want to add?
No, I think, sorry, thanks, Mr. Chair. We were here recently and did talk about the standout piece that I'm putting my name to. It's an attempt to try and bring something that is not only of national but also actually of international significance, so that it makes a draw card, and working in with Tourism Nelson to the extent that if these days you do want to bring people to a region, you've got Golden Sands and Abel Tasman, that brings them, but you also need, if you're going to do something cultural, and cultural tourism is bigger than natural tourism worldwide, more people come to see culture than they come to see nature. I couldn't believe that till I found the figures, and it was actually correct. Then you do need something that marks you like the Lenlai does in New Plymouth. So that's where I think we need to take the Suter. It's something that will be funded completely by the generosity of donors in Nelson, so that we no fallback on the ratepayer whatsoever for that if I'm successful in achieving it. In one form or another we will get something, but that's my project over the next 3 years to do that. And it will make it a destination, the Suter a destination, and that sort of word is thrown around in the tourism industry because it really does mean something. It means it comes to the top when you look in Lonely Planet Guide, or the ways in which you find out what you must do when you go somewhere. So I'm hanging my hat on that. If we have specific questions around the financing, we definitely do need, we're saying, one more person within the system to keep it going, because we are stretched beyond God's belief at present in terms of what we're asking our staff to do. Now, you will be hearing that from lots of other people, I'm sure, and lots of other organisations. I'm merely stating it that that is the situation. We've tried to be very modest in our request for the next 5 years through that process, but we do need it. It's a heartfelt request, and we hope and we note that you've put it through in the statement of intent that can be met. But if there are any specific questions, I'll put them forward to John around finances. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity.
We're looking forward with excitement and expectation for your personal project.
Sorry?
We are looking forward with expectations of excitement.
It's going to be a delightful surprise to Nelson, yes.
And I note in your statement of intent you talk about stretch stretch fundraising targets around the acquisitions and increasing donations. So that's part of what your project is, I presume.
Absolutely, yep. We don't want to burn ourselves out, but at the same time, we just feel you only get one go at this, and art does have a lovely sense of intense competitiveness around it. If you go into the art world, it is an area where people try to outshine each other in the right sort of way.
Yes.
So to do that, you do have to have stretch targets. You've got to say, well, we can go one better than just a 60,000 people community. We can have something that's the equivalent of Auckland or the equivalent of Christchurch in one work rather than a series of works. You can achieve the similar sort of aim with less numbers of works if that work and the specific things that we acquire through our legacy group are of the highest quality. So we have a policy of collecting seminal works, not lots of works of different artists, but seminal works, significant works, such as the Bill Hammond Heafy Highway that our patron allowed us to finance, is a seminal work of Bill Hammond, probably the best known and most respected painter alive of New Zealand descent in New Zealand today. So that's the way we're trying to foot it with the big guys.
Thank you. Before I ask general questions, Jane and John, anything you wish to add?
I'll just add a point to say that over our plan, 40% of our revenue is being generated by our own efforts. And I'm not talking about the sponsorship stuff or the fundraising stuff, but the trading stuff is going to be increasingly important to the suitor. And that's the kind of target area we're going. So we're not just putting a hand out in either direction, either in terms of investing in the collection, nor investing in that stretch to meet our depreciation. So I just wanted to get that point across. It's in the figures, but sometimes these things are easily missed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jane?
Kia ora tātou. Just to acknowledge, Craig mentioned it, but one of the things in terms of being limited staffing is the fact that the board has to take on additional work, and that needs to be acknowledged, the hours that the trustees are putting in to keep it afloat.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
And thank you, the trustees, for that work. Now, there'll be questions around the table. I've got Councillor Rutledge and Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Great to see the visitor numbers continuing to rise. I think it was a previous time you were in here or time before, there was discussion that you expected to actually see them taper off after the initial opening bump, and so it's really good to see that continue. So is that you now believe that you're setting a new baseline, and it's up and up from here? It's not going to drop away as previously mentioned?
I'll go back to the chart.
That's why we're getting back there. What we feel often with this situation is how far do you stretch your expectation, because if you don't meet it and it comes back to the council report that you've gone under, there is some sort of emphasis in good management governance that you shouldn't stretch too far, because then you'll be seen to be underachieving. We have not actually taken that as an attitude. We're basically saying no, we will actually set literally stretch figures. So, I mean, that's just a term, it's a contemporary jargon, but basically it means that we will set numbers higher than we'd previously operated on in terms of targets, and, you know, come hell or high water, we'll work to make them happen. So they are high, they are stretch, and if we come under, we're still doing damn well, but we've just decided no, as a board wanting to make the suitor really something that excels in the community as it already does. We want to build on that strength.
Yeah, and you can see on this chart, so the blue down there is where we're at Halifax Street, so that's just straight out exhibition visitors. The brown's the next financial year, and then the green is this financial year. So you can see the sort of steady growth. there is the opening of the suitor and the redevelopment. So that's what that extreme is. August is extreme, if you like, because that's both what's going on in the suitor and the International Film Festival in the theatre.
I think it's fair to say that October brought in a lot of tyre kickers, but we've kept them coming. So that's the important thing. And yes, generally you will see a taper off from that sort of one period where you're opening, but we've managed to counter that. And the 5-year plan definitely will grow those numbers over time. Hopefully exponentially, but we'll see.
Thanks. There's also mention of TDC funding, but I don't see it in the financials. Did I miss that, or?
It's only small.
So the answer is, in the financial that I presented there, I've combined them. The reality is, and we went yesterday to present to TDC, and I think we gave them a very clear message that they are underperforming. They are providing 12% of the base grant funding. It's fair to say, though, that doesn't affect what we look at from Nelson. That has been covered out of our trading income. And I guess the problem there is that if we are having to cover the non-recoverable cost of supporting collection, which represents their area, belongs to the people of Tasman and Nelson, if we're having to meet that out of our trading income, all those non-recoverable expenses, then that doesn't leave us the trading income to cover our depreciation. So that's the message we gave them yesterday. It's very clear, even at the response in the room, that we have further work to do to, I guess, escalate that point with them. Any assistance we can get from Nelson to get that. We did point out this is not Nelson's gallery. This is a gallery belonging to the people of Nelson and Tasman. And that's the message that's got to be there.
You track, as I'm aware, I understand you track international visitors. Do you track where people are coming from? Do you have any sense of that, whether they are coming in from Tasman to visit the gallery?
We have carried out an extensive survey using our volunteer group, and there are 27% people coming from Tasman out of the local visitors, 27% to Tasman, the 73% are Nelson based. Education-wise, 23% are from the Tasman region. We have presented them the statistical figures to support our case. And they do support our case that around 25% is the target we want to see them build to as part of base grants. Now, when I say base grants, I'm not including the depreciation factor in recognition that they did not support nor agree to the redevelopment. So we're saying, okay, we'll cover that from trading revenue. Does that make sense to you?
Yep.
Okay, so that's where we're at.
And final comment, and it's just a comment from me. I'm really pleased to hear you talk about being a nationally significant place. To me, the vision and mission statement doesn't quite capture that ambition.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rutledge. We certainly should take that on board, and if it hasn't conveyed it, we'll go back so that it does convey it, because it's certainly part of our intent. But thanks for that observation.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing, you mentioned Len Lai, so I went and had a look at Len Lai when I was up there at Christmas. If you could steal a golden tree, you'd be on the money. Because it's mesmerising, it's beautiful. I spent so much time in that room, it was incredible. Jane's mentioned the board is taking on roles that maybe shouldn't be by the board but should be staffed. So my question is, we've got this amount in our long-term plan for staff. Is that going to alleviate the board from taking roles that maybe that should be staff?
Yeah, John, could I answer some of it? But I'd say yes and no, to the extent that I think some of the more specific roles that are day-to-day, even administrative, and we're going to be careful how we put that, of course, but even some of those roles that board, in particular John, is doing a great deal of work on at present, should not be done by governance, quite clearly. So that is an area where, yes, the alleviation, that's where a lot of the number that we're asking for the increase is set in, but it won't stop the board having further responsibilities that you've mentioned Lenlow, you've mentioned New Plymouth. Their council gives $3.5 million each year to the gallery. They have more people working in there. If you'd noticed, people in uniform, full paid staff, they definitely get more done by paid workers rather than volunteers. We're not asking for that level, and I think as buying into becoming a board member of the SUTA, you are buying into doing a lot of work beyond simple governance meetings at a voluntary level. So you are becoming another volunteer for the SUTA if you're on the board. But it's that mechanistic day-to-day administrative stuff that the board shouldn't be involved in, that it is having to help an understaffed resource with. John, did you want to add to that?
I think it's fair to say that the SUTA is a pretty diverse organisation. We're offering education, we are offering art classes, and obviously in that trading income. That brings in a whole lot of skills that is very difficult to have in a 7.9 FTE staff. Just not possible. So, yes, we have to do things like, for example, building a pricing model for venue hire. That's all been done, but to try and make it automatic. Now, those skills aren't going to exist in 8 staff. So, those are the areas we've had to pitch in. Those are the areas where we need more strength, is that sort of administrative and commercial aspect. So, but that's to release the resource to get the focus out there on that fundraising piece, which will always include a huge part of board time. Okay, that can't be avoided. That's part of being on the board. I hope that's explains.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you, and thank you to all of you for this excellent report and the figures that are before us. It's something that we all can feel proud of. And John, I'm particularly pleased with the way you presented your case to the TDC. Thank you for that, because this is a regional facility, as you say, and it has to be. Sooner rather than later recognise it. I'm loath to even raise this point, but I want to, because I don't seem to be picking holes in anything, really. I really don't. But on page 37, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that donations are down. And we talk about 74,000 people through the door, but am I reading that right, John? 3,223 for donations?
It's fair to say that normally we would have had a degustation dinner which would have brought up that number. But just again, unfortunately, because of bandwidth, that's done by voluntary involvement. And unfortunately, the people have always coordinated that there's been some issues there in health, etc., that's caused them to step back. So, yes, that's a temporary setback in that number, but we obviously have plans ahead to resolve that.
Can I just talk about that with John? Because I'm aware, have you thought about having an EFTPOS machine sitting, say a little handheld one sitting alongside your donation box? Because I would like you to consider that. I won't tell you about Rotary and our caravan and our hot chips and hot dog. But we went to that at $70 a month. And it's amazing how many young people, and I'm talking about 12, 13, 14 that have these cards, no cash on them at all. Now they might visit the gallery and wish to contribute something in the way of a donation that way. And so, but I also want to let you into a secret. I rang Christchurch yesterday, and the Christchurch Art Gallery does have that. So it's not a new idea.
No, it sounds like a good suggestion. I'm sure we'll take that back and certainly have a look at it. That'd be good.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Any further questions? I just got one actually. We're told in that staff report that there are some matters in the council's letter of expectation that are not covered in your statement of intent, but they're being dealt with through Audit and Risk Committee. So I just want to make the point that personally, as chairman of the committee, I don't want to see any surprises come up later on any of the matters that are not being met from the letter of expectation. So I'm sure the Audit and Risk Committee will cover them well.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. The other question I had just arose from your comment, Julie, that your energy costs are a bit of a burden. I'm wondering in terms of sustainability, how well is the actual design of the building? Does it incorporate any solar capture energy?
Not in that respect. I mean, we've got increased energy costs because now we have state-of-the-art systems that protect the collection, and we're obliged to have, if we are borrowing artworks, to protect them. So we run HVAC that's to very tight parameters. We have been embarking on some things to try and reduce our energy consumption, change the fuse size from the road, and looking at how we engage with our power energy supplier. We are also going to investigate other measures to perhaps not run the HVAC in the other areas of the building quite so extensively. The building itself has got a lot of insulation in it, so when it gets to stable temperature, it generally keeps that. But the fact is, we have got these systems that use more energy.
I think it's also, just to add to that, this year, during the period of November through January, there was a spike in spot prices. Now we've been back over, done the analysis for the 12 months, and we came in break even between spot price purchase of electricity versus, on the basis we work, versus having a fixed wholesale price. But we're now enjoying benefits again from spot price dropping, and that has been traditionally that we've always enjoyed a benefit from a 40-60 split in our electricity arrangements. Now that's getting very detailed, but all I'm saying is we had lakes low. When lakes are low, yep, the thing moves against us. So hopefully over the next year, with a little bit more evenness in weather, hopefully we will continue to see the past trends. But we do manage that, and we manage that very closely.
Thank you. I just follow up with the fact that due to the very good work of our mayor in getting the proper recording devices for our sunshine hours in Nelson, we are now duly recognised and accepted as the highest sunshine state of the country, you might say. And I'm a champion for using that in terms of solar energy. And I like to see as many opportunities taken as possible. And I'm also aware of some methods which are artistic in terms of the solar arrays and things that they have, things like the solar daisy. So I'm very keen to promote as much as possible that Nelson is a high sunshine solar city, and if we can incorporate it into our artworks through the SUTA, that would be wonderful. I can put you on to someone who can advise you more about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And perhaps I could just explain a little bit about the fact that the art world has become more sensitive to keeping art at same temperature and the same humidity, to the extent that if we wish to, as we do, and we have a special arrangement now with Te Papa to Borrow Works, we have to produce for them several weeks of figures showing that our humidity and temperature in our building hasn't derivated more than, a very minimal percentage right through that period. And, to put it crudely, in the old days, that wasn't as strict a requirement as it is now. So this contemporary society that we live in, where you've got so many concerns and so many forms you have to fill out, be it audit and risk and everything else, actually also includes audit and risk around artworks.
Sure.
So it is just an increased cost just to achieve that. And if you go upstairs at our place at the SUTA, the banker machines that keep that temperature and humidity correct and make a sort of a thrumming noise chewing through dollars.
Right. Well, thank you very much indeed for your presentation today. The visitor turnout is great. I enjoy it when I visit it myself and take visitors to town there. And I'm glad that the restaurant is working well with the link that it has, and the fact that the council makes that contribution in lieu of admission charges. So it's all very good. Thank you very much for your report. We've got one final question here from Councillor Rutt.
Yeah, sorry, I just did make a final note. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question is, do you believe the revenue sources that you've identified to develop are going to be sufficient to run a balanced budget, including that required ongoing maintenance?
The answer is, from the maintenance point of view, perfectly confident that we have developed a 30-year maintenance program and replacement program with the help of Opus, and therefore those numbers that are incorporated are based on that work. That'll be updated, for our point of view, annually, probably with council 5 yearly, and we will monitor that through. I guess no one probably is more conscious than the SUTA staff and board that we don't want to go where we've been. And accordingly, that's a very, very strict plank with us. Will we be able to completely fund depreciation? Unlikely, which means we will be looking at the future for grant income for some replacement aspects. But it's not so easy to perhaps raise a grant for air conditioning replacement of some aspect of air conditioning. So that's where we have to have a certain amount of those funds that we're ongoing generating and putting aside for those events. One of the biggest mistakes previously wasn't necessarily that we had a membrane roof. Our problem was it didn't get replaced at 20 years to 25 years when you've got to replace those roofs. So all that stuff is built into that plan. And again, we are developing maintenance programs in terms of preventative maintenance, particularly given the trees on the location and so forth. So yes, very important part of what we're doing.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That just brings another question to mind from me. In your SOI, your statement of intent, you have your acquisitions policy. I know it's actually called an acquisitions and de-acquisitions policy. Our museum is currently in the process of de-acquisitioning items that are not necessary, and Councillor Courtney and I are working on a working party to assist the museum in its developments. Do you have any de-acquisitions?
If we do, it's usually related to an artwork that has disintegrated, not because we want to get rid of it because we haven't chosen carefully in the first place.
But I think it's a very, very tender subject in the art world, as you know, because if you do go to Te Papa, who are finally displaying the national art that we all have better than they previously did, you'll see Cook's Cove, and it's a painting that did reside in the SUTA, and the SUTA sold that to Te Papa to pay for its ongoing costs in the bad old days. They should never have sold that painting. But they were between a rock and an extremely hard place, and they did sell it. The real critical thing is to not acquire anything but seminal works, and occasionally we do turn down, in fact we quite often turn down art, and occasionally we turn down art, and that can be quite controversial if it's a Nelson artist offering a free work to the SUTA. But the cost for us to store that and keep it for 50 years with more things coming in is excessive and something that we have to meet. So our acquisition committee only acquires and only accepts gifts that it believes should be significant for the next 100 years or so, that they should sit there in that sort of context, rather than that we're a repository for anyone that's got an old painting that they'd like to put at our place. No, we won't look after it for you unless it's of significance.
Thank you. Well, that I think completes the examination of the report and your statement of intent arising from our letter of expectation. I'll ask for someone to move that the report and its attachments be received. It's been moved by Councillor Rutledge and seconded by Councillor Noonan. I'll put that separately. Any debate on it? Yes,
thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, it was interesting reading the statement of intent and where the SUTA is going. They've obviously put a lot of time into this particular report. I can see that they've diversified, and they are diversifying. They're thinking of all the things they can get revenue from, and I'm heartened by that. It is a fantastic venue. It's a place I've been going to since I was a young child. I remember the steps going up into the original one. That's how old I am, I guess. And I'm also heartened by the fact that there's a maintenance program being developed, and I think that is so important because we all need to have those. We all need to have a maintenance program, and that building is at its best, so we want to keep it at its best, and we don't want to end up having to replace things because they haven't been maintained. So I think kudos to the board. Thank you for your work and for the staff work. It's always a pleasure to go to the Suter, and like Councillor Barker, it's a place to take the visitors from Nelson, and it's always a pleasure to go in there. So happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say that I concur with everything that Councillor Noonan has said. It's running exceptionally well. We're also very proud of it. It's one of the 4 pillars in this community, and it's certainly carrying above its weight. I just want to remind around the table, and I don't think you need it, and I said this yesterday, no, it was the day before, wasn't it, when we were talking about the museum, I think, that this is a community asset, and it's not a business, and I don't want the Suter to get preoccupied with revenue raising. Yes, certainly, but there has to be a balance, but we must get clear in our minds, in fact the whole region needs to, that these assets, the Suter, the School of Music, the Theatre Royal and the museum are community assets. They will never show a profit, and nor should we expect them to. They enrich our lives. It's what makes our region special. And I just don't want to see anyone have thoughts into their mind that this has got to be revenue raising continually, because it is an asset that we've got to be proud of, and all 4 are pillars of our community, and when they are, it draws people, they draw people together, and that's the wonderful thing. And we are a council that believes that community is everything, and this asset here brings people together in great numbers and gives them pleasure, satisfaction, and enriches their lives. So congratulations to you, and we hope to give you all the support we can, and we hope that you win the hearts and minds of the people of Tasman. We really do, because that's only fair, and we like fairness. And if you say to me that there's nearly 27% of the people of Tasman enjoy the Suter Art Gallery, well, that needs to be recognised by the community leaders in the Tasman district. So I'm just very proud of what we've got before us today, and to think that we've got this asset in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Councillor Rutledge, with respect to the motion.
Yes, I do. Thank you, and I'm really encouraged to see the increased visitation, the prudent planning of maintenance, and all these things. I think they're fantastic. I think we have an asset that, as a city, we are and can be very, very proud of. I do think we're missing a trick, though, and I think that going to that gallery is worth paying for. And you look at the numbers there and you go, if you were just charging the visitors from outside the region $5 entry, and it is worth it, you would solve so many of the issues or concerns or stresses in the financials. And I do think that that we are missing an opportunity here. We have a fabulous asset. I've been to galleries and many other places, and you often pay a few bucks for entry, and geez, we've got something that's worth paying a few bucks to enter.
Thank you, Councillor Rutledge. Your comments noted, and we'll, as we go through the process year by year, this will be examined again. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no, carried, which brings us now to the recommendation to council. We've just dealt with the 6-monthly report. Now we've got to approve the statement of intent, which was presented to us as a result of our letter of expectation. The matters have been covered thoroughly as we've discussed it today, so I'll call for someone to move the recommendation to council. Councillor Courtney has moved it, and the seconder is Councillor Dahlberg. Is there any discussion of that motion? It's not. I'll put the recommendation to council that the statement of intent meets the council's expectations and is approved as the final statement of intent for this coming year, subject to the confirmation of funding for the trust and the long-term plan. So there's that one subject to included in it. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you again on behalf of council.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Item 11 on our agenda is the Nelson Regional Development Agency's half-yearly report to the 31st of December and the draft statement of intent. So we've got the same process for our that we've just dealt with for the SUTA, for the NRDA. And welcome to the table Mark Rawson and Martin Byrne. And our report presented today for this report, let's get the name right. Is Claire Barton now? Is Claire going to be here?
No, it's Harrison.
Oh, Nikki. I think I was advised of that yesterday, wasn't I? Yes. Claire can't be here. So Nikki, on behalf of Claire, the report writer, is there anything you want to highlight in the report? Any changes or
no, through the chair. I think the report's reasonably self-explanatory. It's a combination of their half-yearly results, which shows that they're tracking well for the current financial year, and it's also the draft statement of intent for next year. So,
anything you wish to add about section 411? The letter of expectation called for multiple years of financials. Only 1 year's been provided.
Through the chair, that's probably a question for...
We'll ask the visitors. Yeah, thank you. No further questions of Nikki? No, well, welcome to our visitors. Mark and Martin, the papers have been delivered. I'm sure our members, our councillors have read them all. But please highlight any points you wish to make and present any statements that you desire that the committee be aware of.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just firstly, an apology from our Chairman, John Palmer. John's had a previous commitment he hasn't been able to get out of, and I looked up at the wrong time in the board meeting the other day, which is why I'm sitting here. So I said to Mark, when I normally come and do this with my chairman, he says about 10 words, so I'll try and do the same policy if I can from that side. Mark will touch on the issue with 1 year of financials. He was in discussion with Chris Ward about that when the SOI was being formulated. Mark will run through a few key points. I suppose from a board perspective, the coming year is a chance to move from sort of establishing a number of private sector stakeholder partnerships and working through execution. We're working on a number of issues, including trying where we can to influence a long-term transformation of the economy. Obviously, the regional identity has been a big project, and the official launch for that is on May the 2nd, which I understand councillors have been invited to. We're also focusing on enhancing the business development and innovation environment. There's some really good work being done with in conjunction with the Chamber and NMIT around that at the moment, and also partnering with the visitors sector and promoting their destinations. So I'll hand over to Mark, and Mark can go through his points, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Marty, and through you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, I have no presentation for you today. I'm assuming that we've had an opportunity to read the report. I just thought I'd touch on a couple of key points, really. One, in the statement of intent, you'll see that we outlined through the strategic parameters section an approach where we just we took quite a strategic development approach to the development of the SOI, not just what did we do last year and what are we tweaking going forward, and particularly looking at the relevance to all of the key drivers of the economy, how they've changed, and really looking into those key factors that will materially change what we do as an operation. And I have to say that in the update that we provided, I think a couple of weeks ago to the Joint Committee, etc., and particularly in our marketing function and in our eyesight function, the pace of technological change and what that's actually doing to the way that the both businesses operate and the marketing channels operate is something that we have to spend a lot of time trying to keep up and ahead of. In respect of our statement of intent, I thought the key area just to touch on was really the 10 key changes that we are looking to propose this year versus where we were last year, and I'll just quickly run through those. I think that's on page 103 of your agenda, although I'm not quite sure I've got the same agenda as what you've got, so I'm assuming it is.
It is the correct one.
Ah, cool. So look, the first thing is just to reiterate that regional economic development strategy, and when I say that, I am meaning a Tīta Ihu type approach, so the whole top of the south is our number one priority, and what we're trying to articulate in the statement of intent is that we've effectively got a two-stage approach to that. So the strategy development process, and we're really trying to get that done by November this year, or December maybe, but that's our target. And then post that, quite a focus on implementation where resources will allow from January onwards. And yes, that does include working with the government around the Provincial Growth Fund, but it's not just about the Provincial Growth Fund. It's actually around the whole regional growth program. And I'm happy to delve into that a little deeper later on if there's a couple of questions, because I suspect that it's probably top of mind. In respect to the other major changes we're talking about, really, again, coming back to that technological change, really, we are putting an increased emphasis on our activities. It really is the transition within the organisation from what would be a broadcast marketer to an enabler of marketing activity, and really that comes back to our core mission, which this is all about providing tools to inspire others to share our story, because that's more relevant and more gets a greater level of authenticity and reach within their peer networks than a traditional approach of the broadcast marketing type function. And yes, everyone thinks, I think, that the digital aspect means we can get a whole lot more reach, which we sort of can at a cheaper rate. But actually trying to create the content and the tools and actually give really good, authentic stories and or marketing activity that others can pick up and put their flavour on still takes a fair amount of time and activity to get us to that point. So the last bit I would just reiterate in that bit is we've just started, and I think I highlighted it in our update, the first locals campaign, which is the first reach out around the identity in a local sense, where we're asking locals to share their extraordinary Nelson Tasman experiences with us. We've had a really good level of engagement around that so far, and I just wanted to reiterate that part of that whole process is actually building a hopefully a set of over 100,000 ambassadors for the region by the time you put the region together in the future. The third point is a decision that we didn't take lightly, but it's all about business plan and focus, which is stopping the current China program as a publicly funded program and transitioning that to the private sector. So why would we do that? There's three key points really from our perspective. That's a shift in focus for NRDA's business plan and our resources, really, about best use of resources. Two, the China program is now at a stage where there is not really a market failure. There certainly was a number of years ago, but China program and China relationships and business relationships have matured a lot, and that's, since the free trade agreement, really. And we believe it can operate sustainably in a private sector business sense. And the other part of that is that the Nelson program is quite significantly based around some significant individual relationships, and Mr. Finlater in particular has some very key relationships that are delivering some really good results for some of our business community. We're working really close with Bill in that transition to a private sector delivery of that function. It means we'll still have the function available, but it will be on a more private sector basis. So the fourth area is something that I'm sure someone will have some questions about, but we have looked to reduce our activity, or we have to recognise a shift in the TDC funding into our organisation. That's to the tune of $100,000. And that means that we are effectively looking to pull back on our international visitor marketing activity, because that's effectively where that $100,000 has been repositioned to from a Tasman district perspective. We certainly haven't taken that lightly either, and are working through just what that means, and particularly with the operators of the Tasman district, because they are a significant part of that 400-odd thousand that we raised in the private sector partnership. A large majority that does come from those partners, but it's very real, and we're an organisation that needs to get closer and closer to, or get some more focus around doing what we can really well and not trying to be everything to everybody. And this is one of those really hard decisions that we're sort of taking. The fifth point is around the establishment of the Nelson City identity story as the first sort of subset story of the regional identity. So you recall when I came in, we initially presented the identity, the concept was to get a really solid regional identity story. And that's about the region's place, particularly in New Zealand, and then New Zealand and globally. Second phase of that is to then realising that we need to bring that down to the local level and to the places of Nelson Tasman, and recognising that now Nelson City is the first and the most important hub of the city, of the region, and wanting to follow the same framework so we get a consistent set of stories, marketing approach, everything looks like it fits together. And so that's one of our priority focuses, and absolutely picking up the consistent messaging and fitting in around the smart little city vision, which actually fits into it really nicely. The sixth area is just reiterating that we need to realign some of our resources and activities to strike that balance between the public and the private sector funded activity. And the core point really in there is the visitor sector is our private sector funder. They have put their hand in their pocket to the tune of around about $300,000 to $400,000 to partner with us in the delivery of our services. So I do get a lot of feedback about focusing on some of the business development innovation, some of the other economic development activities, but I do just want to take the opportunity to reiterate that, you know, hats off to the visitor sector. They're putting a fairly serious amount of their money in, just in respect of we generate around about 45, well actually 47 I think it is actually, % of our revenue from other non-local government sources. In New Zealand the average is 18. So I feel like we're doing okay to deliver value. Number 7, we will establish a new partner program focused around the identity project in the 2019 year. We need to roll the identity out, start to get the tools out and used, understand where the value works. But we certainly are looking to build another partner program outside of the visit sector, quite focused on talent attraction, but it will be in that 2019 period of time. Some additional focus on the business development and innovation activity area as that resource allows, and I guess that's one of the key things we keep getting feedback from the private sector around, is actually something that we can actually influence, and we've been doing a lot of work to make sure we're taking what I'd call a whole of ecosystem or a collaborative approach, particularly with the likes of the Chamber of Commerce and NMIT, and that's starting to progress, I think, pretty well. The last 2 points in there is we've identified the transition to a new eyesight business model. I touched on that last time at our update. I don't have that solved right now. This is not something we're going to solve in 5 minutes. It's a systemic change, and we are working on delivering a revised eyesight service in line with what the New Zealand sort of approach is, because we're not the only place in New Zealand that is seeing the business model effectively become unsustainable, particularly in the last 2 years, just as technological change has driven customer behaviour. And the last area is around little bit more of a sales-focused approach to the event program. That will be subject to resource dependent. So, but it is effectively being a little more proactive around event attraction to fit gaps, and particularly to try and drive seasonality of the visitor sector. So that's sort of the key changes that are in our statement of intent. I won't go on anymore. I think probably better to hear the questions and see if we can answer that.
Thank you, Mark. See, I know there are a few questions that were brought to my attention before the meeting, particularly on this section, the changes. So I've had Councillor Rutledge got a question.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, guys. Good update. Couple of points from me, and I guess I have some concern about the reduction in funding that the partner, in a loose term, is providing across the road. And I guess when this all was set up, you pushed very, very hard that this must be that it was the Nelson Tasman Regional Identity Strategy that was absolutely integral to it, and that was a key to the ongoing, the success of the program, but the ongoing relationship as well. It would appear that TDC have a different view to that, which is disappointing. But in light of that reduced funding and the increased, increasing reliance on the private sector and its fabulous results too, I guess what I'm concerned about is that there's the potential for you to be influenced very, very strongly in your programs by a couple of big operators in the private sector, because they're paying the bills. They're going to be they'll be going to be in your ear, probably even louder than we are about give us a return for our money, and fair enough. So when you say you're realigning activities and you're looking to increase some of that focus on the private sector, if I interpreted that right, how are you maintaining that balance with, I guess, what we consider some of the key drivers for Nelson around bringing the talent in and helping drive things?
Through you, Mr. Chair, good question. The 3 points I'd make. One is Nelson City Council is our biggest customer. So, and you never forget who your biggest customer is. So I just wanted to reiterate that, first of all. Second, when I talk about that rebalance, that is actually about rebalancing the organisations that we inherited, which were, it's about 75% visitor in terms of resources and the way that the partner program works to work out our budgets. The third element of that is the identity piece of work gives us a platform now where we are starting to integrate the visitor marketing and talent marketing. In a domestic sense, they are absolutely one and the same, primarily. So, sorry, when I say absolutely, that's probably not fair. They're very much one and the same, and we're looking to do what we can to align those as much as possible and leverage them. A little bit different in an international sense. The third part of that is in respect to the partner program. Our biggest partners there are actually the airport. So airport critical partner, the port. Then actually some national organisations, the likes of Inter-Islander, and sort of local but national, Nelson Coach Lines, Nelson Taxis. So what I am saying there is there's kind of, if you like, a regional good set of partners, and then a set of what I call individual business operator partners. Yes, they are our major partners and we work with them, but I think there's a reasonable balance there. What I would say is I'm quite buoyed by the fact that those major partners, we've taken them on that journey through the identity. They get it and they're using it probably better than anybody and actually buying into it. So I feel we've got the balance as best as we can. I hear your point, and very valid, but I'm certainly not forgetting who the number one customer is.
If I could just comment through the chair, just from a board perspective too, we're very mindful of making sure that the the organisation is working across the fair and isn't just a tourism-based entity. One of the ironies when we merged the two organisations was the concern among the tourism industry that that'd be pushed into the background. Yet, if you look at the work that's been done on the regional identity, there's probably an argument in the first year that that's been more of the focus. I think, as Mark says, when we have the launch next week, there's a lot of stuff being done around business innovation and that sort of things that isn't really out in the arena yet. So, you know, for instance, the board meeting last week, we had a group of 10 different organisations together working in various ICT space and development spaces. The amazing thing was that 7 of them had never met each other. So one of the big, and this place the size of Nelson, so we have a very big role as a facilitator to try and get those groups working together. But, you know, we take on board that, and we have to be very careful from that side of things.
Follow-up question then, through you, Mr. Chairman. Another thing that I have a few concerns about is that I think there's some fantastic thinking going into the work that's coming out. And I guess what I would see as the biggest waste of money possible is if we invest all this money, time and resource into doing great strategy, great thinking, great plans, and then you can't pull the trigger because you don't have the ability to do that when it comes to the talent attraction programs, whatever they are. Do you have enough to deliver the results that we are collectively agreeing we're expecting?
Through Mr. Chair, I mean, ultimately, we are very stretched in what we're trying to achieve. My ultimate vision actually is to create a talent attraction program that is the same as the visitor attraction program, because the business community, the facts tell us that actually talent attraction into our region is actually the biggest constraining factor for the future of the region. For a whole lot of factors, from our ageing population right through to the type of technological change that's actually driving the business community out there now. My honest answer is no, but on the flip side, I have a very good board and we are absolutely work with what we've got, and we're doing everything we can to try and build solid partnerships as much as possible to leverage every council dollar in that way. The other thing I would say is the regional strategy piece of work, I absolutely agree about. This is not going to be creating some lovely tomb like it might have happened in a number of other regions, but we do have to go through that piece of work to be able really to play in the provincial growth program. And the output of that regional strategy piece of work will be two things. A regional strategy with some really clear direction. It's very directional and based on what we see as the real facts behind what drives private sector investment. So those core things we need to be aware of. And then the second piece out of that will be an action plan, which is where all the actions actually happen. That's where the real... And we'll use the strategy to prioritise what happens in the action plan, because what I'm observing at the moment is we have multiple entities doing multiple things and everybody's sort of pushing their project to the top, but the strategic context of, is that the most important thing? Will that actually really move the dial? Is that actually going to be sustainable for, in particular, productivity growth and wage growth in the region? We don't have that framework just yet. So in respect of your question, what I'm saying is that will be an important part for actually us to be able to come back with some good, solid advice in what we think we really should be focusing on in one or two areas. And I'm certainly not someone who's that keen on trying to do the loveliest strategy in the world and then have, not do anything about it. But I do feel we need that framework before we start with all the actions. Otherwise, we'll just end up being, expectation pulled.
Yep, thank you, Mark. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through to Mark. Thank you for your presentation. I want to carry on where Councillor Rutledge left off, and you were speaking about just a moment ago the visitor program, partnership program, and then the regional identity, and you're going to have to establish another partnership there. But in amongst your presentation, you said they're one of the same, you quickly said, and I just wanted to know, well, why would you have said that?
Sorry. what I'm effectively saying is, in the delivery of, particularly in a domestic sense, that what has traditionally been a visitor-orientated program, i.e. visitors come to the region and undertake these these activities or whatever, or come for this event. What I'm effectively saying is actually that's a really important step in attracting talent to the region. And the same reasons that talent is looking to come here is very similar to what visitors are looking to come here for. And I see the visitor attraction as an entree to selling the region as a potential place to actually live and work. One of our challenges is actually to be able to position future working and living opportunities in the region when we have that visitor in town. And so what I'm saying is the delivery mechanisms, we're certainly looking at how can we be smart about actually connecting someone who's had a great time living here with the opportunity to potentially experience that all the time. Sorry, has a great time visiting here to potentially connect with actually experiencing that all the time. And one of the things I would say in that space that we've just been doing, it's going to take a wee while to work through, is one of our biggest challenges is we have some really exciting opportunities for the primary employee, but we're employing for two usually. And that's also part of the challenge we have here, if you get what I mean. Primary employee and the partner. So that's what I mean. We're just looking to integrate that.
Thank you, Mark. Can I just ask another couple of questions? Is passing on to the private sector, the China program, is that freeing up capital, significant capital for you, investment funds for you to spend elsewhere? No, it doesn't really. It certainly means we will be reapportioning some operational funding into particularly the business development, innovation and the regional development focus. But outside of that, not a lot. It runs as a pretty lean machine right now. I think it's a natural progression, quite frankly, you being the facilitator and then passing those sort of activities on to the private sector. I think it seems very sensible to me. Just one other question, and it's niggling at me on so many fronts at the moment, but I'll keep myself contained. When did you get notice? Did you receive any prior notice from the TDC that they were likely to cut their regional development funding by 100,000? I mean, I felt it was unbelievable that would happen. I thought, well, at least that it maintain it at the same level, hopefully increase it, but no, regional development, goodness gracious me.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we talk to them often. Be fair to say we had talked about increasing that a bit to be a bit more in alignment, and particularly around the identity. It was a bit of a surprise, I must say, but yeah, as they go through their long-term planning, just like you, we started to get that message. Yeah, but obviously disappointing, and we'll do everything we can, and I have been spending a lot of time in front of their council and just trying to work through potential alternative, because the decision's not finally made, but it's a very strong indication. And I do appreciate your support in that space as well, and the industry, who have, the visitor industry in particular, who have looked to support that approach. But yeah, yes, we've become aware of it. It's quite disappointing, but we'll do it.
So the situation could be salvaged. There's still hope there, is there, that they may, revisit it and reconsider it prior to the long-term plan being approved?
If I may come in, Mr. Chairman, through you, I think it's unlikely this year. I don't think it's a lost cause. I think it would be inaccurate to suggest there isn't support around the council table and among the senior staff and the TDC on what the NRDA is trying to do. But trying to translate that support at the moment into funding is challenging. When the two organisations merged, obviously there was a fractious relationship between TDC and Nelson Tasman Tourism, and we're probably still inheriting a little bit of that from that side.
Thank you. Councillor Dalbeck.
Very real.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, can I just ask some questions around seasonality and that shoulder season, that winter wages or lack of. I'm kind of noticing that we definitely have picked up from that December, March to October, April, I think and we're also seeing even numbers of the museum and just the visitors. So I'm really my interest really was the government sort of informed us all they were putting a lot of money into that area a few years ago, and now you're doing it. How are you dovetailing in, or is it their money, our money? How are we actually getting that?
Really good question. Ultimately, you're right, that we partner with Tourism New Zealand. Part of our seasonality strategy is actually fitting in with Tourism New Zealand. It would be nuts of us to think that our sort of $100,000 international marketing budget could do a lot if we weren't absolutely fitting into that seasonality approach that Tourism New Zealand is taking. Totally aligned, and I do keep retesting that every sort of 6 months with our visitor sector. Is this still the most important thing? Yes, it's improving, it's great. What's quite good is the domestic visitation is also improving in that area, we've actually really started to see that again hang on in the autumn period as well. So we're totally aligned with New Zealand's strategy, and our partners. It'd be fair to say the visitor sector is actually starting to develop some quite good product development. That was one of the challenges, that we had some great, you think about our core attractions, it's all middle of summer stuff. So actually to develop a shoulder season product is not quite as simple as, geez, it'll be awesome, don't worry about the weather. Our operators have started to develop, in my view, some quite good products that are actually fitting the spring, a little bit challenging with the weather elements, but certainly the autumn type product as well. So I think we're playing a team game.
Another question, just on that same area, along with your events management, congratulations on pulling a few big ones into town. So the question there, because that's also lining up that seasonality, funding budget in that area, obviously not enough, but how are we managing there?
I'd have to say that we are, we're stretching the public dollar as far as we possibly can to try and leverage as much value as possible. And without getting into a bidding war situation. So we're very clear with some of those events that are just wanting to shop their event around New Zealand. Doesn't fit. We're not necessarily in a bidding war, but that is actually, events are actually the way that we really can influence that winter and that autumn particular type period. Any small assistance in that space would actually help. But, I realise we've been through an event strategy perspective. We've got that pretty clear. And we've got a funding environment that sits alongside that. Actually having support for the community events, that will help, because that's actually caused some realignment of what you might call more traditional economic events. But the last point in that is very much from the strategy perspective, we're looking to take a 3-year view around how we deal with events. So the strategy gives us an opportunity to actually align the funding with a 3-year program, because the way it's been structured at the moment is a bit challenging, because it's only annual funding sort of commitment, if you like. And we're dealing a lot, Nikki and I are dealing with one event in 2021 right now and one in 2022. We need to be able to actually, with some certainty, engage in those longer term conversations. So any additional support would be great, but I realise you've got pressures all over the place, and we've got to make the best use of what we can.
Through Mr. Chair, just on that there, do we actually negotiate with some of the bigger funders? There's 2 or 3 of them out there. I know their challenges. How do they get maximum out of their money and their leverage? Yeah. Do you actually work with them, or I know the council's trying to?
Really good question, and actually I have just started that conversation with one of the sort of bigger community funders, if you like. And the second part of that is certainly with the airport relationship and what they might invest in events. We're certainly looking to align that as much as we can, and I would like to think that we have an opportunity actually to build almost like a community funding partnership, if you like, around the attraction of major events. But that all takes time, and but that's absolutely where I'm thinking, we have sort of facilitated the start of a couple of those conversations, because I believe you're absolutely right, that's the opportunity.
I thought that was great. Also, just feedback really is congratulations on your working out your priorities and leaving some behind. That's not easy, but well done on that, and also well done on starting the region working together. Really appreciate the work you're putting in.
Cheers.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I've got three things I want to ask. The first one is clarification, and maybe Ms Harrison can help me here, but I thought that the TDC had indicated that the funding would reduce or stop after a certain period of time, and it was from the previous council, and there's only three of us at the table that were here then. So I just want to clarify that so that we're actually, I'm clear.
I think, I'll see what Nikki says, but yeah, it wasn't so surprising to me.
No, it was not to me too.
Nikki, any comment?
Through the Chair, I don't think there was any formal notification or any formal communication that it would reduce over time. I think there'd just been a general indication that around that level of support may not be ongoing.
And I'll just comment that we do, of course, have the opportunity during our joint council meetings to explore this directly.
Thank you. That was the first thing.
Yep.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because I thought in the back of my mind, I was thinking that it was going to either reduce or completely disappear, and I thought we'd come up with some other arrangement. However, I will move on from that point. I would like to address the talent attraction and the fact that it's the biggest challenge, I think you said. Have you worked with council about anything that we can do to assist in that area with anything? That's a pretty broad question, but I just wondered whether we're doing what we can.
Look, what I would say is, yes, we've started to have some of those conversations. We'll be doing, in preparation for the regional strategy, which we need basically just the mayors are leading that conversation with the iwi chairs to get a governance group in place, as I outlined last time. And the second part of that is just getting the funding for that regional strategy through basically the other two LTPs. We haven't been sitting on our hands though. For the last few months we've been doing a whole lot of work to understand the research base and make sure we really clearly understand the background to what are the priorities so that we use that money as wisely as possible and not paying people to tell us what we already know. Detest that. Talent attraction in that space. We have gone through a couple of things. One, the business sector has told us that alignment between Nelson City and Tasman District around some really important priorities in the region is one of the biggest challenges, that they are looking to see some direction or some certainty against which they can invest. And what does that mean? One of the biggest issues in that space is actually around urban planning and understanding housing provision. And then the second element of that is housing provision and how that aligns with where the industrial land provision is, and obviously the likes of the transport networks, etc. So what I'm trying to articulate there is we don't have a plan of attack just yet, but what we do know, and we are starting to work deeply in that aspect, that urban planning, and particularly around housing, will become a critical factor for talent attraction. And you're starting to see that in many different ways in the paper and things at the moment. The second element of that is absolutely supporting the reinvigoration, if you like, of the centre city of Nelson City, because the lifestyle needs and the drivers of the talent that we are looking to try and attract to the region is probably going to be looking for a bit of a different social environment than what we potentially have been planning for in the previous life. So those would be two immediate aspects. And then the third bit is really just us trying to coordinate the key players together so we can actually get a story out there and a message out there consistently about the real job opportunities. And there's a highlighted before that opportunity for employing for two. And I do think that the public sector potentially has a significant role to play in assisting that process. And then the last aspect that we have done some work on and we know is one of the barriers is, again, for the partner or the family, or actually when they have a family, it's easier to integrate into our community. They have, you know, school connections and school sporting groups and that sort of thing. But we do know that if it's a couple coming, that for the partner, either way round, sometimes integration into the community can be a bit challenging. And our recruitment firms, our bigger firms, etc., tell us that's a challenge. So we would like to think we can look to work with all the key players to find some sort of initiatives to actually really, it's a little bit like pastoral care, if you like. So we haven't done any specific work in that space yet. I want to make sure that as we go through the regional strategy process, we actually get that really, really well anchored with the private sector. But I was asked to name 4 things at the moment. Those are the ones that keep coming back to us. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, that was an eye-opener and very, very helpful. Thank you. Some of those things I have heard, but some of those I have not, and so that helps us with our thinking. The last point I wanted to make was, have you seen this report that we've got here today?
Yep.
Okay, so 4.4. It talks about alternative premises and the board can address the matter at the meeting. So I'm now asking you what that might be.
4.4? Oh, didn't realise that was on there actually. I missed that. So certainly. So look, I think I've signalled through the updates from about October last year actually that we've been working really closely on trying to connect the ecosystem of business development and innovation players in the region. Why have we done that? We've done some research when I not long got here, and one of the things the business community told us was actually if you could coordinate all those sort of public good entities into one place, which was easy for us to engage with, that would be hugely helpful to start with. We're not quite sure who does what, and it's a little bit of a confusing environment. So the second part of that is then we looked at best practice around New Zealand and in a couple of other international areas, and understood that effectively, you know, collaboration comes from just co-location, not necessarily nice and formally structured and designed. So the second element of that was that report told us there was some challenges in the role of NMIT as an important provider of skills and youth education, particularly into the workforce, and the fact that over time their workforce was requiring more and more different education skills now because the technological change means that people are retraining just about every year. So as a result of that piece of work, we looked at what would be the best response to that, and the concept of co-locating ourselves, with NMIT, particularly with their business school, and assisting to build some connectivity between the students and the business sector, particularly the postgraduate students, which we have quite a number of. Also intern programs, etc. And then also the likes of the Chamber of Commerce and some of the functions and activities that they are looking to undertake, alongside a set of what I'd call public good sort of networks in the region that don't necessarily have a home. They all operate from different places or operate from home, actually, such as Institute of Directors, the Young Professionals Network, the IT professionals, etc. There's actually 10 on that list. And then, so as a result of that piece of work, we have pulled together a concept that has now progressed to a potential real co-location opportunity, working with NMIT, and the concept of that is has progressed to a point that we would like to try and make that happen this financial year. In fact, we'd like to try and make that happen as soon as possible. We have progressed to the point of trying to find the opportunity for someone to take up our lease environment for where we are, to actually enable that to happen. So it is effectively a co-lab, if you like, or a co-location of the public good entities, and the last part of that is then to work in with the likes of the private sector players such as Bridge Street and a couple of others that are looking to emerge in exactly the same model. So that's what we're trying to achieve. I think there's a really good set of evidence that sits in behind that model and behind what we're trying to achieve in that space. And we've got a good set of collaboration going on between Nelson, NMIT, ourselves and the Chamber as the anchor players in trying to pull that together. If we are successful in actually finding another tenant and getting the final location and lease arrangement sorted out with NMIT, the Chamber and ourselves, which is progressing quite well, any lease arrangement still has to come back to you for sign-off, so I understand, because the way our lease terms work, I think we're pretty much the only organisation that could ever occupy that space. So we will be coming back in that context, seeking some support for that sort of approach.
Thank you, Mark.
So that's where we're heading.
I'm going to be a little bit cheeky and say, are you looking for something in the CBD?
Sorry, I wasn't clear. On NMIT campus.
Right.
So absolutely, and
that's close enough.
And well, yeah, from my observation, NMIT campus as part of the CBD, I know it's I find this quite weird. I've said this to Nikki many times here. People talk about NMIT being outside the city, and I'm like, I walk to my meetings there. It takes me about 4 minutes, I think. Yeah. When compared to where I've come from, where Useford is quite a long way, it's a huge asset that we should look to embrace a bit more. As a city.
I can help you there. The council has addressed this.
Yeah.
It now has a policy of trying to improve the connection between NMIT and the CBD. Yep. And it's looking at doing it in many ways, including public transport even. So yes. That is something that I think we've put in our long-term plan, haven't we? So, Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mark and Martin. Through Chair, just if you have just a brief comment. You mentioned about the Insular Islander relationship there, etc. Do we as NRDA have a bit of reach and overlap into the Marlborough as partnerships, marketing?
Certainly, look, in an international sense, we are basically, Marlborough and ourselves have what's called an international marketing agreement. We collaborate together with Tourism New Zealand when we go into market.
Cool.
It's the most sensible thing to do, it's the most logical thing to do, and it means our dollar goes twice as far.
Cool.
When I talked about Inter-Islander though, that's our business partner program where we've actually managed to reach out and create a partnership specifically with them around the Nelson Tasman region. Ironically, actually, also they've become a big supporter of an event that you would have seen recently, and they're looking to support another one. So those are some of those opportunities. But
cool.
Yeah, we partner with Marlborough in the international market, not so much in the domestic market because it's a little bit different where we are actually seeking the same visitor for the same piece of time.
Okay, thank you. And I often see Marlborough, especially Picton, Kaikoura, Blenheim, has been the gateway, often a gateway into Nelson, and people often have to make that choice of turning left or right.
Yes.
When they get off the ferry, but also the greater aspect of our horticulture, agriculture, etc.
Yes. Yeah, I think the other point is everything we're trying to do is actually make sure they've made that choice before they get on a ferry. Because if we're relying on them when they get off, we've got a real challenge. Although, unfortunately, the natural environment has been helping us lately.
Correct. Thank you. I've got a few follow-up comments and a couple of questions. I just remind councillors, particularly those who were at the Joint Shareholders Committee meeting earlier this week, that one of the things that we're looking at is trying to improve the situation out there in the community for those that have to deal with the problems that was highlighted to us today, the different rules, different planning rules, housing and so forth. We are looking at having as many shared services and cutting down on those red tape problems that exist. The next point I want to just cover, we're looking at the talent, and the comment in your statement is the attraction and retention of talent. No, you haven't mentioned retention. Has that been a problem that we are losing our talent?
Sorry, through Mr. Chair, yes, everything's about attraction and retention. What I am articulating there is actually it should say attraction, retention and development of our talent. The retention bit though is something that we are starting to understand a little bit better, particularly some of our corporates, which is to do with the additional opportunities to grow a career once you've got to a certain level in the organisation. And we are a place that is very attractive for people who are, 10, 15 years away from retirement, They're very comfortable in doing what they're doing, and there's not a lot of roles in that place. In that space, there is very limited opportunities. So we have a bit of a growing ground, if you like, in that quite attractive for that family, young family people growing up, you know, get to the mid-40s, want to progress. There is some, we're hearing there's some challenges for the progression of that in the region. Part of that's also to do with the size and scale of our businesses. You know, we have quite a large number of smaller businesses. Where actually, in this case, you're talking about the founder. So what we're effectively saying is the retention part is as important as the attraction part, if not more. That's partly about working with what do we need to do to create an environment to stimulate those sort of people wanting to stay in the region. But the second bit is also some feedback we've had, and I think this organisation, I think Pat would agree with me, and some of the challenges you've had as well, is one, we're quite successful in attracting some people here, but again, because of that partner and that integration into the community aspect, unfortunately, and our organisation's been through this once and twice in my short tenure, but people just can't quite connect into the community and will find that whole balance they were looking for, and then they're off again. And you know, that cost of reacquisition is so, one, disruptive, the actual physical cost of it, the pressure it puts on the rest of your organisation. So that was being reiterated on more than, you know, on a number of occasions from the community's perspective as well. So that's why we think that something to do with that pastoral care element and helping to integrate people into our community and welcoming them to our community is an important part of what you might just, we're not talking about just nice marketing programs, is what I'm trying to say.
And I was also, in the letter of expectation, as has happened, I guess, for the last few years, sustainability is mentioned. And I see your comments in the statement of intent. You'll have heard me comment earlier to the suitor about what I would like to see Nelson take more advantage of, solar activities. There are some growing businesses in Nelson around this area. Are you participating with them and looking at the possibilities for Nelson to take advantage of its solar advantages?
I think that my key point there is actually that's something that needs to bubble to the top as we go through the regional strategy approach, because the whole point is we've got lots of cool opportunities everywhere. How are we going to be able to prioritise what's really important? What I would say is outside of that, yes, two companies in particular we have been working with, one who's already here, one who's not. It's actually very real about the work that the Mayor had done around sunshine hours, because that's one of the, you know, our climatic conditions, not just sunshine, wind and a few other things, are actually making things quite attractive for a couple of those companies to have a bit of a look at the region. But I feel it will be potentially a priority, but it will need to come through the regional strategy approach so that we can kind of focus our resource in some narrower areas.
And I had one other question, if you can enlighten me. When you, the 5 main areas, one of them was blue.
Yes.
Now, what? I'm trying to work out in my mind exactly what the blue.
Sorry, I think I put. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. I think I put ocean-based blue economy, because we have been talking about blue economy, which is a bit of a term, but it gets misinterpreted sometimes. So it's very much around 2 aspects really, and obviously a big competitive advantage here. One is what you would call the everything that comes out of the sea, so the fishing industry, primarily the seafood industry. But the second part of it is then everything such as Marty's operation and the significant engineering and or what you might call support mechanisms for everything that operates on or in the water. And we've got a pretty significant hub down there in the port area in that sort of space. And then the last part of that is the likes of Cawthron and particularly Plant and Food, who are you know, doing some world-leading research in that sort of space. So we've tried to, instead of explaining all those in like 4 or 5 different bits, we've put it into one box and said that's a competitive advantage we think we should be looking to accentuate.
Right. Well, I want to thank you very much for participating in this discussion today, and I'm sure our councillors are far more aware now of what's involved. It's been very informative. So thank you very much. Outside of here, they may come and talk to you. You may have other questions, but today has been very good. Are there any further questions? So you're removing the recommendation the Governance Committee receives the report and seconded? Been seconded? No further discussion? Yes, Councillor Skinner. Yes?
Thank you for your presentation. It's always very informative, and we always fire a lot of difficult questions at you. I'm always impressed by your understanding of the region so well. I'll probably take this opportunity really as being a public meeting. I've sat through the arts and culture with Suter Art, and we've sat with Regional Development Agency, and it seemed that theme, disappointment with TDC reducing and offloading on us from my perspective, and to be blunt, and I can talk on my own behalf, TDC governance needs to pull its socks up. This region is a gateway to the greater region, and I'm sure the greater public see the good work that this organisation have been doing and the good work that the previous speaking organisation have been doing for the greater region. I know my small business, it's Marlborough, Tasman, Nelson, that's where you need to be marketed, that's where you need to be available for. So if there's anything to be a bit pointed on, as a council, we may need to be a bit more pointed on that as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Scott. Just a procedural point. Once we've entered into debate on this matter, I'd actually ask you guys to move to the gallery. Yes. The debate is now over the matters in front of us. So, sweet. Oh, right, sweet. Yes. Any further?
From I support what we've got in front of us. I'm just taking the opportunity to point that there seems to be a bit of a theme coming through, and that our neighbours, from one sense, are very supportive of what we're doing in the greater region, yet on the figures wise, monetary wise, and support wise, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. I would just reiterate what I said earlier. We do have joint meetings, and there's no reason whatsoever why you can't raise these at those meetings.
You're quite right.
So, any further discussion on the first motion, which is the receipt of the half-yearly report? There's not. I'll put it. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. We have the second one, was recommendation to council that the statement of intent be adopted. Moved by Councillor Noonan, seconded. I captured Councillor Dahlberg's aye first. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to make this recommendation to council. Today was one of the most fascinating pieces of work that I have seen in this meeting, particularly around the talent attraction retention area. I think that's an important part for us to be thinking about. I think those, and some very practical reasons why people can't be retained or attracted to Nelson. I think it's a very important piece of work for us. And I think that the NRDA are obviously proactive people. They seem to do a lot of work, and for me, it's becoming a lot more practical, and I can see the fallout of the work that's been done. It's actually coming to fruition now, and it makes a lot more sense to me. I think in the beginning, when we got all the vision, it's sometimes hard to see what's going to come from it, but I can see now that that vision is turning into practical, and I'm quite excited about it actually. It takes quite a bit to get me excited, but I'm very happy to support this to go into council.
Any further discussion? Councillor Rutledge.
Again, I'm very happy to support this, and just want to congratulate the team on the work they've done. The difference in the quality of thinking that's coming out of this organisation compared to perhaps the previous iteration of it is just night and day. I think it's a great investment for Nelson to be making, and happy to support that continuing.
Councillor Rutledge. Councillor Dahlberg.
Yeah, I'm supporting it again. Mr Chair, mainly about the, I'm pleased that we're actually focusing on the positive outcomes rather than, I know we want to go back the TDC bit, etc. I really want to make sure we're focusing on the good bits going forward. And if other people don't want to contribute, it's more about what we want to. It's our budget, it's our community, And I'd like to focus on the positive bits and leave the other people who aren't turning up to their own bits.
Thank you very much. Anyone? Has had 3 speakers in favour, none against. I will put the motion. Those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. Thank you. We'll go to item number 12. And when we've moved that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting for a short break. So if someone care to move the exclusion of the public recommendations, you're welcome to stay for a cup of tea with us. But if you're busy, we understand.
I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Courtney, including the parts on those who will be staying in the meeting. So if you move, Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor Dahlberg. All those in favour say aye. Against, no, carried. We're adjourning the meeting.